Alrighty, we're on to week 74 of World War II, January 25th, 1941. When anti-Semites infight, Jews still die. Pogroms in Romania. Guess we know it's going to be a pretty depressing week, I'm guessing. So let's go ahead and dive right into it.
No. It's gonna be the Panzer guy. You know, the Panzer guy. Yeah.
The Panzer guy.
No, not Guderian.
The Muffin Man.
Yeah, all right.
Who lives on Drury Lane.
January 25th, 1941. Operation Compass, the British counteroffensive versus the Italians in Libya, has been going on for 6 weeks now and has been a major success. But Libya is not the only Italian possession in Africa. This week, far to the southeast, the British also strike.
Dun 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 dun.
I'm Indy Nidell. This is World War II. Last week, the Luftwaffe began heavily bombing Malta. French and Thai forces clashed in Cambodia, the British made preparations for actions in Africa, and the Chinese communists gained some valuable international PR after being defeated by the nationalists 2 weeks ago. Here's what follows. There is some fighting this week between the Chinese and the invading Japanese forces. In southern Henan province, the Japanese are trying to make Wuhan safe from Chinese forces that threaten it. On the 25th, at the end of the week, 3 Japanese divisions break the first Chinese defensive line heading towards Wuyang. There is also action in Southeast Asia in the Franco-Thai War. On the 24th, Thai bombers raid the French airfield at Angkor. It seems, however, that hostilities in this war are winding down, and after last week's French attacks by both land and sea, Japan is proposing that the belligerents sign an...
Oh, what is that? What is that mustache, my man? Ugh. Horrible. My guy, shave it. You look way better.
armistice, concerned that the war is starting to go in France's favor. Nothing has been signed yet. Well, that fighting may be winding down, but the war in Africa is heating up. William Platt's offensive against Eritrea begins the 19th, and that day, Kassala and Tessenai, which had been evacuated by the Italians, are taken. Then the 5th Indian Division moves along the south towards Aikota and then hopefully Bishia. The 4th takes the northern route towards Keru. The roads are mined and the bridge over the river Gash blown, but they make good time anyhow, and by the 21st have occupied Aikota. But the 4th reaches Keru Gorge, defended by 5 Italian battalions, and are pinned down, unable to do much of anything. However, the 5th, brilliantly, detaches a motor machine gun group and a light infantry group from Aikota and sends them with all haste to the roads behind the Keru position. They bayonet their way through the pass and cross the Italian rear the 22nd, taking prisoner a force that could, and maybe should, have held the pass for weeks. A full 6 of Italian commander Luigi Frusci's men. By
Let's
the
go,
25th,
India.
they have occupied Siagle Wells and are within 10 kilometers of Agordat. That and Barentu are Frusci's final resistance points, but by the end of the week, the British have cut communications between them. And as for the African action to the northwest, well, last week I went over the battle plan that the British and Australian forces have for attacking Tobruk. That battle begins this week at 5:40 a.m. January 21st. And goes pretty much according to plan. Check out last week's episode if you want details.
Yippee.
By mid-afternoon, not just Tobruk, but 25,000 prisoners, 208 big guns, and 87 tanks have been captured
I like this visualization.
at a cost of 400 men. The major goal of the attack is to capture the harbor undamaged, and while it isn't entirely undamaged, it is still very much functional. They also take 10,000 tons of water, refrigeration and distillation works, and a power station. Within 48 hours, the harbor has been swept for mines and is now usable as the main African supply base west of Alexandria. Richard O'Connor's forces aren't just sitting around, though. Already by the end of the 22nd, the 4th Armored Brigade has made steam from Tobruk and cut the roads west, south, and southeast from Mechili. And the 7th Armored Brigade is around 35 kilometers from Derna. What the next big goal of this wildly successful North African offensive is, though, is Benghazi. Thing is, back on the 11th, the British government decided that Greece was going to soon be top priority for all men, supplies, planes, or whatever would be necessary to help the Greeks face what they think is an impending German invasion of Greece. Archie Wavell, commander-in-chief of the whole Middle Eastern sector, which includes North Africa, has been told that after the fall of Tobruk, that priority change takes place. He strongly objected to the subsequent proposals to denude the forces in Libya, particularly since the buildup of the Luftwaffe in Sicily boded ill for the future. But they were overridden by the Prime Minister and the Chiefs of Staff, who nevertheless insisted that Benghazi should be taken and developed as a base for both the Navy and...
So hold up. Britain here is saying, hey, after you take Tobruk, we're going to divert a lot of the resources that we've allocated towards you for the Greeks. Which, let me tell you, the Greeks definitely need some assistance because the Germans are coming, right? The prediction by the by the PM or whoever the hell is making the guesses here, his chiefs of staff, whoever, they're correct, right? We know the Germans are going to come down eventually. But then to say at the same time, we still want Benghazi, though, to develop it for both the Navy and the Air Force. Then, I don't know, maybe, I don't know, send what you can to the Greeks, but don't divert things from the North African front then? Like, focus on taking Benghazi first before diverting resources to Greece, right? Like, secure one front that you're having a lot of success for before cutting resources from it for somewhere else that currently is, like, pretty solidified. You know? Right? Like, the Germans aren't there yet. They could be. But, like, kick the Italians out of Africa. Like, wait, what is the thinking? I don't understand this logic. Like, I could understand the logic if they felt like I would disagree with the statement. But if they were to say something along the lines of, like, they don't believe Benghazi a important enough base for the future, I would disagree with that assessment of Benghazi. But at least then, their justification for diverting resources would be semi-logical. But to say at the same time, we still want Benghazi, but we're going to take away, that doesn't make sense.
And the Air Force. So they're going to take away a lot of his strength and his supplies, but he still has to take Benghazi. And to do that, he's leaving the desert for different terrain. I'll talk about the region in some detail next week, but for now, the Australians focus on Derna, and the 7th Armored Division attacks the Italian armor at Mechili. As the week comes to its end, the Italian defenses at Derna are holding off the Australians, and Electric Whiskers, Annibale Bergonzoli, manages to avoid his 20th Corps being surrounded at Mechili the 23rd. And with Italian bomber and fighter support, his forces are holding off the enemy at Derna Airfield. As a side note to this campaign, on the 19th, Benito Mussolini arrives at Obersalzberg as Adolf Hitler's guest. Hitler, as he has already told his commanders, tells Mussolini he will send a force to Tripoli. It is to be commanded by Erwin Rommel. Hitler also figures tangentially in some developments this week in Romania. On the 21st in Bucharest, the Iron Guard spends the day hunting down Jews. They beat thousands of them, and 120 are killed. Many of those hung on hooks in a slaughterhouse with signs on them saying, kosher meat. That's
real fucked up. Oh, that's...
is the Bucharest pogrom, and it happens the same time as the Legionnaires' rebellion. Okay, there had been anti-Jewish legislation in Romania, which had grown more and more restrictive since the Jewish Codex last August, which you can look up. We've also seen over the past couple of months tensions seriously growing between Conducător, leader, Ion Antonescu on one side, and Horia Sima and the Iron Guard on the other. This continues to grow. But the thing is, both sides believe in the seizure of Jewish property and assets, but Antonescu, as head of state, wants it done to benefit the government and Romania as a whole, while the legionnaires of the Iron Guard, they were originally called the Legion of the Archangel Michael, hence legionnaires, are basically robbing Jews for their own benefit. Antonescu sees this as detrimental for Romania. So it's more about method. Antonescu wants it to be by legal appropriation rather than by robbery, terror, murder, which is what has been happening to a lot of Jews, even as others have been forced to sell their assets for basically nothing legally. Well, this has been boiling all through January, with Antonescu demanding that the Iron Guard cease its escalating terror tactics. In return, they have linked him to both the Freemasons and his family relation to Jews. His ex-wife and her mother were Jews, and begun plotting to oust him and take over the country. They've been calling for a solution to the Jewish problem and trying to enlist sympathy from Nazi Germany. Well, they do have plenty of sympathizers within the Nazi organization, but guess what? The Iron Guard does not run the Romanian government. Antonescu, who does and who, controls the Romanian army, met with Hitler last week on the 14th and promised Romanian support in any future war with the USSR, and in return got Hitler's silent support for eliminating his enemies within the Iron Guard. On the 19th, Antonescu fires the Minister of the Interior, the head of the security.
Still fucked up man, but smart, which is why he's scary. Yeah, that whole, let's talk a little bit about that legal thing. It really isn't, I mean, of course it isn't outright violence against Jews, right? It is still, like, it isn't much better than what the Iron Guard are doing, right? Because in a way, they're like, ultimately the end goal, the end fate for Jews there is going to roughly be the same. Poverty and just general shitty way of living. Like no social mobility for them in either way, being forced to sell their stuff. It's just, though, right, this is the thing. I think in general, people do not like violence. And so when you have the Iron Guard being so openly violent against a minority, that lends itself to having more open resistance to it, which is then ultimately going to get attention, right? And when you are committing atrocities against a minority, you don't want attention, right? That's the thing. Okay, like, now of course, right, we're living in the United States. There's a lot of attention on on what is happening to minorities in the United States. But what they're trying to do currently is overwhelm with information to distract and just exhaust, right? That is the current goal and strategy. The plan before, right? The goal before 2016, and arguably even before 2020, was pretty much under the radar sort of thing that they were doing in the US, whereas like they were trying to not have attention on them as they got certain things passed and paved the way for these things, right? But now they're like, you know what? Fuck it. Full steam ahead, baby. Ugh. And essentially that's what we're seeing here in Romania, right? We have the Iron Guard. They just want to overwhelm, and they just want to be just outright commit violence and hate. Antonescu, he wants to keep it on the radar, and ultimately I think that's like, if you want to be an authoritarian dictator, going under the radar is probably the best bet for you, right? Here's my tips for how to be a dictator. Go under the radar, dude. Like, come on. Because by going under the radar, by doing it legally, right? Even though it's still fucked up, and you and I, we're smart enough, we know the truth. For the general public, in an authoritarian state, they are going to, unless they have access to certain communities, they are going to be roughly in the dark as to the realities of the situation. Or they will just say, "Oh, it's not it's legal. It's legal, so it's not a bad thing," right? Some people will have that justification in their minds. Either due to ignorance or just because they were looking for an excuse to not involve themselves in speaking out against atrocities. And so, right, you have those people. Antonescu's way is going to largely, long term, be capable of quieting resistance, right? There's going to be less open resistance in the long term. It's going to be hard, also probably a bit harder for a resistance movement to really gain traction. Whereas the Iron Guard, a lot easier to form up resistance when you have very blatant acts of violence to point toward that everyone can see, right? It's just my personal belief in power and resistance, how to go about that sort of thing.
Police and the Bucharest police. Loyal military men are appointed to their posts, and the army secures the telephones, police stations, and hospitals. Legionnaires, however, prevent those men from taking their new posts, and the Legionnaires' rebellion begins the 20th. They are well armed. They capture a bunch of government buildings. For 2 days, the military defends itself from attacks, but does not itself crack down. During that time, the pogrom happens. The Legionnaires, however, do not stop with just Jews, but kill a bunch of soldiers from the army. Okay, this is going to be long story short, but I need to point out that the rebellion and the pogrom were parallel events, both intentionally organized, with one not being a side effect of the other. Well, Antonescu is busy bringing in tanks to Bucharest, and his army is ready to explode over the anti-army violence by legionnaires. And at the height of their fury, he gives the order to shut down the rebellion, which they do in hours. A few dozen soldiers are killed, and at least a couple hundred legionnaires, but the aftermath is big. Nearly 10,000 legionnaires are sentenced to prison. Horiasima flees the country to Germany. German troops march through the streets of Bucharest and cheer Antonescu. The power of the Iron Guard is broken for good, and Antonescu's hold on the nation is that much stronger. And here are a couple of notes about other individuals to end the week. On the 24th, Franz von Ferra, a German fighter pilot who'd been taken prisoner after crashing in England last June, turns up in New York. See, a couple weeks ago, he'd been sent with hundreds of other German POWs to a POW camp in Canada. 8 of the men had managed to escape on the train across Canada, but von Vera is the only one who is not recaptured. While he's in New York, Hitler awards him the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross. And of course, Canada tries to have him extradited. But this takes time. And during that time, he will go through Mexico, Panama, Brazil, and Spain, and make his way back to Germany.
What the fuck?
Also that day, the 24th, Frank Knox, American Secretary of the Navy, writes to Secretary of War Henry Stimson, "If war eventuates with Japan, it is believed easily possible that hostilities would be initiated by a surprise attack upon the fleet or the naval base at Pearl Harbor, with inherent possibilities of a major disaster."
How is Knox ignored? Is this what what?
And with that possible foreboding, the week ends with British successes in both East and North Africa, fighting in China, but a slowing of hostilities in Cambodia. Also this week, the British carrier Illustrious, damaged as we saw recently, leaves Malta for Alexandria for repairs. And of course, there is the rebellion and pogrom in Romania. Now, you may not think it has much to do with the war, but it does. Everything does by now. Romania has promised military aid if Germany attacks the USSR, which Hitler is determined to do. Germany is going to send troops through Romania to attack Greece. which Hitler is determined to do. Romanian oil is a big power source for the German army. So no matter what it says in the papers, Romania is already a part of this war. So is everybody else. Unfortunately, war crimes and pogroms.
And that was week 74 of World War II, January 25th, 1941. When anti-Semites infight, Jews still die. Pogroms in Romania. It wasn't as depressing as perhaps I thought. There was less information regarding the pogroms in Romania as I thought there would be based upon the title, but still a good week of World War II. Well, good video. Informative. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.